Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us for another NA webinar. We've got a really kind of a unique one today, and we're joined by Lucy Russell with the National Pork Producers Council. And we're going to have a little bit of an interactive webinar today and do some breakout rooms a little bit later. If you can see in the chat, I emailed everyone our two one-page briefs on federal advocacy topics. We're going to be kind of testing those out in some breakout rooms and a little bit of mock role-playing is in lobbying. So hang tight and we'll turn on microphones and videos for those breakout rooms. But if you have questions for Lucy during her presentation, go ahead and drop those in the chat box, and we'll have a Q&A after the fact and read those off as well. And before we get started, just a little, just want to say thanks to this month's webinar sponsor, High and Dry. They sell true industrial grade waders. The owner of that company is actually an oyster farmer out of South Carolina that found that there was a great need for some comfortable, good aquaculture specific waders. So really appreciate them sponsoring our webinar today. Check them out and reach out to me if you'd like to get in touch with them. And before Lucy starts with her presentation, I want to introduce Mike Freeze. He's the owner of Keogh Fish Farms out in Arkansas and a past president of NAA who currently sits on our board. And really appreciate Mike coming in to he's going to give just a little bit of an aquaculture perspective. He's got decades of lobbying experience for our industry. And we just wanted him to kind of kick it off with his own kind of personal experience and some advice for everybody.
All right. As Charlie said, my name's Mike Freeze, and I'm a fish farmer. But one thing you'll find out is most fish farmers I know are very politically active. It's because regulations that are passed at your state legislature or in Washington, D.C. can have a direct impact on your bottom line. So early on in my career, I decided that I needed to be involved with my legislators, both at the state and federal level. And when I tell people that, I know both my U.S. senators, all four of our Arkansas congressmen, and a whole slew of our state senators and representatives, they're kind of impressed, but at the same time, I tell them it's not that hard. What you have to do is to establish a relationship with that elected official. And there's numerous ways that you can do that. Of course, one way is by making a donation. And when I talk to my fellow farmers, a lot of them, they said, well, I could never donate, tens of thousands of dollars. Well, that's not really necessary. I mean, even a small donation, $50, $100, what that does is that tells that elected official that you're supportive of them and that they can count on your vote. So that's very important. So it is important, all elections are very expensive nowadays to donate, but that's not the number one way that you can develop that relationship. You want that elected official to know who you are. And so if the elected official is having a town hall meeting or something, being there and showing up and having that official begin to recognize you is what's important. One of the best ways you can do that as a farmer is invite that elected official and or their staff out to your farm. Sometimes, if you're inviting a U.S. senator or U.S. congressman, their time is extremely valuable, and sometimes it's difficult to get them out there. But make sure to invite their staff, because if you can get their staff out there, I can assure you, you have their chief of staff or even their ag liaison person come to your farm and you show them, and they're just like, they're wild because they've never seen anything like that, whether it's a fish farm or a dairy. And they go back and, of course, they talk to their boss. And the next thing you know, the boss has got somebody calling, wanting to make an appointment to come to your farm. And I always encourage you to open your farm up to your elected officials, because the more they get to observe, that you're a hardworking American, just, trying to make a living, then when you call them about an issue or you email them, it carries a lot of weight. Your elected officials will tell you they'd rather hear from a handful of constituents in their district than have 1,000 computer generated emails come into their email box. So, like I said, it's about relationships, and it's not necessarily just money, but you will have to put some time and effort into it. Just like when you're trying to establish any kind of relationship with whether it be with a friendship or a business relationship. So I think that's the most important thing is to, establish that relationship where when that elected official sees you in a crowd of people, they know who you are. And believe me, they love to be able to say something when they're in a crowd of people. They see somebody they know, they may say, "Well, hello there, Mike. Have you had a bird problem lately?" And all of your soybean farmers and rice farmers will turn and look at you, want to know why the elected official is talking about a fish farming issue when there's only one or two fish farmers in the crowd. But that will happen if you establish those relationships.
Thanks so much, Mike. That was just excellent. So I hope everyone was listening. So
Okay.
and so with that, we'll and if you can hang around for the Q&A, Mike, you may get some questions you want to field too. That'd be awesome. So thanks so much.
Okay.
So with that, I'm gonna hand it over to Lucy. Let me give it just a bit of an introduction and bio for Lucy. She's the manager of the producer engagement with the National Pork Producers Council. Lucy serves as I'm sorry, she's dedicated her time to produce development, grassroots advocacy, and philanthropic programs that amplify producers' voices for positive change. She serves as a lead on the National Pork Producers Council's Legislative Education Action Development Resource, or LEADER. You'll hear a little bit more about that, and Pork Leadership Institute programs. Lucy also assists the National Pork Industry Foundation's Board of Directors as a staff correspondent, bringing to light opportunities to promote pork and educational resources for emerging student leaders. Before her current role, she served as the National Pork Producers Council's accounting administrator, and her prior experience also includes employment with Wells Fargo and USAA in sales, finance, and insurance. Lucy hails from the state of Colorado. She attended the University of Colorado to earn a bachelor's of administration in communications and is currently pursuing a master's in administration in business administration from Southern New Hampshire University. So I got the honor to meet Lucy at the Animal Agriculture Alliance, which is a kind of a big umbrella for livestock communications around the nation. The National Aquaculture Association, as well as the National Pork Producers Council, all kind of get together and collaborate and network at that great event. And yeah, really appreciate your time today, Lucy, to give the aquaculture farmers out there a little bit of your expertise. So with that, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you so much, Charlie, and thank you all for having me on today. It's a big honor to build up the coalition of animal agriculture. And I don't know if there's very much for me to discuss. Mike really summed it up really well. The key to getting things done, whether it's in business or in the political realm, is 100% based on the relationships that you're able to build. Legislative officials, they can't be experts in everything. So it's up to you to build those relationships and make those personal connections in order for them to care about your issues. But really excited about today's webinar and excited to share some of the information that we use to help train our producers for pork. I think that it's incredibly important. One thing that we like to say is if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And it's really easy to cut different federal benefits to certain programs if you don't have people showing up and building those relationships, making the stories about agriculture personal. So the more that you can get involved, the more impact you're going to have. But I'll go ahead and share my presentation with you all, and we'll get started. As Charlie mentioned, there will be a little bit of a breakout session opportunity for you to kind of practice your skills. One of the biggest things about being successful in communicating your message is being able to practice. So we'll go through that after we go through some of the basics about government and some background about NPPC. So can you all see my screen? Thumbs up? Okay.
Yep, looks great.
All right, great. So I wanted to give a little bit of background about NPPC because we are set up very differently from the aquaculture associations across the country. We actually have a pork checkoff That is all funded by the USDA and the federal government. That allows us to increase demand and provide educational resources and also boost up our state organizations so that we can have an impact locally and at the federal level. So they can't get involved in anything political since they are funded by the federal government. National Pork Producers Council, our whole focus is on legislative issues that impact the pork industry. So we take on all of the political engagement and policy issues, relying on some of the research issues that the pork checkoff takes on. So it's really a team effort, but we're able to be pretty effective, and people in Washington and at the state level definitely know who we are. So we have 42 different state organizations. They do everything that we do at the checkoff and at the National Pork Producers Council, but at a hypercentric level. So they focus on just issues within their state. Through this kind of three-legged stool, we're able to have a really broad and exceptional impact on our elected officials and the greater consumer. So it's a pretty good setup. But I always like to go through the NBPC mission statement because I think that it aligns pretty well with what you all are doing in aquaculture as well. But hopefully this will be the only slide that I read word for word, but it speaks to the heart of everything that we do, and it's why we get out of bed every morning and defend our pork producers. But the National Pork Producers Council advocates for the social, environmental, and economic sustainability of U.S. pork producers and their partners by fighting for reasonable public policy, defending our freedom to operate, and expanding access to global markets. We focus on animal well-being, freedom to operate, expanding global markets, and sustainability. A lot of what our focus centers around on the sustainability side is not only financial sustainability, but also a wise use of our resources. We want to be stewards of the resources and the environment that we operate in. And so we have to make that a focus of everything that we do as well. But a little bit about you guys, as you well know, National Aquaculture Association, you guys are super diverse, over 1,500 different species. That is incredible. We deal all with pork, everything pork. So it's pretty impressive that you're able to bring everyone together under the realm of aquaculture. But your 25 different aquaculture associations, members of the National Aquaculture Association, and that's at the regional and the national level. And then you'll have 16 state associations. It makes sense from a production standpoint that you guys have 16. That's where most of your production takes place. But I love your idea about one industry, one voice. With that much diversity, being able to bring everyone together and form a formalized movement to get beneficial policy in place for your industry, it's super impressive. But we're pretty aligned, right? Aquaculture is agriculture. We both contribute to the overall economic health of U.S. agriculture. That's something that elected officials care about because it speaks directly to the economic performance and their electability, right? So we both have a focus on healthy animals and healthy people. We want our people to be healthy by consuming our products, and we want our animals to be healthy so that they're as marketable as possible. But yeah, the environmental sustainability definitely translates into economic sustainability. We can't sustain our operations unless we're focusing on being wise users of the resources that are available. So we have some pretty aligned interests. So that's why I was really excited to take part in this webinar. But Charlie said the name of our program, Legislative Education Action Development Resource, which is quite a mouthful. But there are some keywords that I want to focus on through this training program. It's really about education and serving as a resource. Mike mentioned the relationship piece. in order to build a relationship, you first have to make sure that the legislators are knowledgeable about the issues facing your industry. Once you build that relationship, you can serve as a resource for them so that when unfavorable legislation comes across their desk, they can turn to you for advice. They can get your input, and because you're a constituent, they will value that input. So, our goal of this program is to make your voice heard and be taken seriously. Washington is all about quorum, right? And following the rules and speaking up when it's opportunistic for you to do so. If you're beating your drum the loudest, that's great. But if it's not at a time that can make a positive change, then you're just beating the drum for yourself, right? It's all about following the rules of decorum and speaking up when it's appropriate to do so, and being able to tell your story in a way that they'll understand. The story of agriculture is a great one, and we need to do a better job about talking about the great things that we're doing for US consumers and global consumers, right? But I think that one of the biggest issues that we face on the grassroots advocacy side is people don't get involved. People don't speak up. And with all of the political noise, especially surrounding the election and things of that nature, it's easy to lose interest in politics because we're inundated with it, right? But as I mentioned, if you don't speak up, then somebody's going to speak for you. And it's not always going to be the story that you want to be told about your industry. Sometimes people will assume that officials will do the right thing, but we've seen recently, especially in our industry, that that's not always the case. Or maybe they assume that someone else will do it. If we assume that someone else will do it, inevitably that obligation will fall to the ground. But Mike mentioned also the lack of money or resources, and it's not necessarily as big of a burden as people think it is, but anything with government takes time. And so it's not a sprint. It is definitely a marathon, and it requires patience for long-term results. But a lot of the time, the issue that we face is they don't know where to start, right? We all had civics class in school, but that's been a really long time ago. And understanding the political process and how bills become laws has kind of been lost in all of the static of everything else going on in your life, right? So we'll go through some helpful skills building, some tips that will help guide you through the process and guide you through the most appropriate time to speak up about your issues. But I think that this next video that I'm going to play for you kind of sums up the general understanding of how the political process works. But I'll play this video for you and go into the actual real life version of how the political process plays out in the halls of Congress.
So he'll be fine. But now he's doing this stuff to Muslims. And then I didn't know you could do that as a president. Like, just I'm doing this and then you're doing it. I just, you remember that?
You thought the Congress would be involved?
Yeah, I'm just a bill.
Yeah.
Right. I thought you had to go through that whole, yes. And then it's off through the something else, something else. Yeah, I thought it was going to be like that.
I think there was another cartoon called I'm an Executive Order. I just show up anytime.
And we certainly saw a lot of that in our last administration, right? So the political process has become pretty complicated. I think that this is a really good visual of the political process and how it actually plays out. But looking at this graphic, can anybody tell me, like, what does this remind you of? You can put it into the chat. It kind of looks like a board game, right? But when we're talking about laws that impact your livelihood, it's anything but a game. And so it's important to take the political process seriously and find out when it's appropriate to speak up, when it's appropriate to kill a bill before it becomes a law, and how to go about doing so. In this graphic, the little areas, the little guys with the briefcase raising their hands, those are all of the times that you can go and meet with your legislator to talk about the issues and how that's going to affect your industry, how that's going to affect your livelihood. All of the little places with the circle with a hand in the middle, those are all of the places that a bill can die. But the best place and the easiest place for harmful legislation, harmful bills that will impact your industry negatively, the best place for those bills to die is before they're even presented. But that takes building up the relationship with your legislator and making sure that you are serving as a resource for them to understand your industry, to understand the issues that impact you. So we'll break it down in a little bit easier to digest version, a little bit more simplified here. So basically, when a bill is thought of, if we go through on the House side, the bill is then presented to the representatives on the House floor after being sponsored by an elected official. The bill is then assigned to a committee for study. If it's released by the committee, the bill is put on the calendar to be voted on, debated, or amended. If it passes by simple majority out of the House, then it goes over to the Senate. In the Senate, it's then assigned to another committee to be debated and voted on. But if they make any amendments, they have to send it back to the House for concurrence. After that, it goes to the full Senate and the full House for a vote. And then it goes into a conference committee. If it clears the conference committee, it goes to the president's desk. He has 10 days to either veto the bill or sign it into law. All of those steps are good to be involved in. It's a good time to meet with your legislator. For our purposes, a lot of the orders that come through try to bypass that complicated process, right? There's so many opportunities in there for the sponsored bill to end, to not be signed into law, or to just go in limbo forever and never actually get the vote. So sometimes different regulations will be presented on the executive side for the purposes of our industry, agriculture. Pretty much everything goes through the USDA or the Secretary of Agriculture. They often give regulatory commenting periods before those regulations go into effect. Most people do not speak up during these regulatory commenting periods, so those that do have an incredible advantage over those that don't. And you can actually find those commenting periods by going to the USDA website, search comments in their little search bar, and anything that has an open comment period will show up in that search result, okay? But building those relationships on the executive and the legislative side can go leaps and bounds to ensure that harmful legislation, harmful regulations do not go into effect. But you'll notice in that whole process that there was no step where the legislator has to visit your farm. There was no step where he has to talk to a farmer to get their input on these different pieces of legislation. So it's a lot easier for them to say, yeah, that sounds great, or no, that sounds horrible, when they are not speaking to their constituents and they are not fully understanding the issues and how that's going to impact your industry. There's a huge disconnect between legislators and the people that actually do the work. They can't be experts in farming, but that's where you come in. You're an expert in what you do. So if you're able to speak with them, if you're able to meet with them, if you're able to write them a letter to make sure that they understand the issues, that will go a long way in preventing that legislation from passing. But there's a graph of diminishing returns. Some of those relationship building actions have a greater return than others. So far and away, the best way to build a relationship with your legislator is by doing an in-office visit, whether that's in state or in DC. If you can meet with them face to face, it's a lot harder to say no to somebody when they are right in front of you and giving you a direct ask, asking you to sponsor a bill, asking you to vote no on a bill. It's a lot harder to say no, and you can ask questions to make sure that you understand exactly what that's going to do and how that's affecting your constituents. The next most effective way to build that relationship is by phone. You can contact your legislator at any point in time. Make sure that when you do, you ask to speak with the person that handles agricultural issues. They'll probably get you in touch with an aide, but those people are the eyes and ears for the legislator. What you say to them matters, and it's incredibly important to treat them respectfully as well, so that they can convey your issues appropriately. Email is also effective to build a relationship because you are able to personalize your message. The downside of email is when it comes to form emails. So if they get thousands of emails about the same issue and they all look the same, they're not going to care as much about it. But if you are able to personalize that message and ensure that you are a constituent and what you say matters, it can be pretty effective. We've seen an emergence of efficacy in social media. The downside to social media is there is a lot of noise and there are a lot of keyboard commandos. So it's incredibly important to remain professional when you're communicating in that way. But when other folks are just typing out a message, it's pretty easy to get lost in the clutter, and it's a little bit more difficult to build rapport with that legislator. Mailed letters, petitions, mass mail, they're somewhat effective, but anything that requires immediate action is not going to be super effective if you send them a letter. It takes a lot of time to get through the screening, and it can be sometimes weeks before that letter actually arrives to the correct aide in order for them to be able to communicate it to the elected official. There's some value, but they reach a point of no return. It's not equitable to send all of your members to DC for an office visit. But as Mike mentioned, they do town hall meetings and things of that nature in district. So the more you can participate in any of these actions, the better off you're going to be, because once they recognize you, they're going to begin to care about the issues, right? What elected officials do care about all the time is your vote. They want to know what affects their constituency, and they want to know that they have your support. They want to understand the issues, but I will tell you, these elected officials sometimes have anywhere from 30 to 40 visits a day with different individuals coming into their office from a range of different causes, whether it's insurance or cancer prevention or agriculture. It's impossible for them to be experts in every single issue that comes through the door. But if you are able to form a personal connection with the member, and provide your personal story, tie it back to something meaningful to them, then they're going to be able to take what you are sharing with them and remember that information as they go through and do their voting, do their committee participation. You have a unique understanding of what you do. So all you need to do is build the relationship and convey your message in an equitable way. Statistically speaking, only 0.8% of the population farms for a living, and that's any kind of farming, whether it's row crops or animal agriculture, 0.8% of the population. 2 to 3% of the population is employed directly in farming. And of our elected officials, about 24 of them have direct ties to any form of agriculture. That is less than 4%. So leaning on your elected official to be an expert in any sort of issue that comes across regarding agriculture is not really realistic. It's up to you to give them that unique understanding. Since they have so many meetings per day, what elected officials crave is personal relationships. It's really difficult to, as a public figure and an elected official, have any time for personal relationships. But they want to know that they have people that they can trust, that they can go to with issues that come across their desk. Once you're able to build a relationship with them, you can begin to form that bridge of trust. But it relies on you being able to educate them in a way that is compelling for them to act, and in a factual way. They want to know the facts, and they want to know how that affects other individuals in their constituency. And with all of the other disinformation that is circling around, the more that you can prove that you are an expert in what you do, the further that will take you when you're building that educational ground for them to build that trust. But I want to, now that we have a little bit of background, I want to go through some of the do's and don'ts when it comes to building relationships with your legislators. Far and away, the most effective way to do so is talking with your legislators in person, whether that's in a DC office visit or an in-district visit. Just because you show up and talk to someone, however, doesn't mean that you did everything right. So I think that it's really beneficial to see some of the don'ts and then go through some of the do's. So I'm going to play a video for you. And one of the trends that's been taking over, especially with people that don't necessarily live in the member's district, but they want to meet with the member, so they can't get a meeting secured, but they'll corner them in the hallway or by the elevator and just try and speak their piece. But unfortunately, especially with these activist groups, they're not following the rules of decorum. And so it's pretty difficult to be taken seriously when you do that. So I'll play this video for you. See if you can pick out some of the things that this person did wrong.
Why aren't you brave enough to talk to us and exchange it with us? Don't you wave your hand at me. I was trying to say you. When I
Hold the door, ma'am. You're gonna get arrested. Senator, do you believe women?
It's almost painful to watch, right? My favorite line at the end of that, "You're arrested." It's you can see that there were some definite things that that group did wrong. I don't think that that group has grown their personal relationship with this member. So I think that it kind of goes without saying, but don't threaten your legislator. Don't intimidate or stalk them. That is not going to help build a relationship. That is not going to establish your expertise with that elected official. Do we know what this group even wanted to accomplish by cornering this member? We don't, right? They didn't have a clear ask. They didn't have a clear purpose to their discussion. And they were trying to get that sound that they could play back for their activist group or whatever cause that they were rallying behind. Legislators don't appreciate that. I know I, as a regular human, would not appreciate somebody coming to me and doing that. So it's important to remember that these elected officials, they're just people, just like us. So having a discussion with them, having a talk with them should be as comfortable as having a conversation with anybody else. So I'll play an example that highlights some of the good things to do when you go through and try to build that relationship with your elected official. This is an instance that took place here in Iowa. It was actually a 2-year process for this to go through. But see if you can pick out some of the good things that this individual does. He was actually really successful in getting his idea passed through the halls of the state legislators. So I'll go ahead and play the example and see if you can pay attention to some of the good things about him.
An ex-convict who was mentioned in Governor Reynolds' Condition of the State speech a few weeks ago is set to return to the Capitol with an unusual request. He's trying to convince lawmakers to change a law that is preventing him from pursuing his dream. Our Capitol reporter, Monica Madden, shares his request.
William Burt isn't afraid of owning up to his mistakes that led him to prison.
I went 4 times. So it took that many times for me to really wake up.
But when he was behind bars, he discovered a talent:
I'm very blessed.
barbering.
You're official when you have the barber pole in your shop.
Something that ignited a sense of purpose in him.
It came to a point to where I had to make a decision if I wanted to keep treading backwards or if I really wanted to try to gain some ground.
Now Burt is trying to gain some miles
I can take you anywhere.
with his new wheels. The convict turned barber has dreamed of a plan to take his talents to the streets with what you could call the barber-mobile.
I want my clients comfortable.
From bringing his services to people with disabilities to small towns without a barber shop.
That's where Cut Kings would fill in or fit in and try to fill that gap.
Now, the one problem with Burt's big idea is having a mobile barber shop isn't legal, but he's hoping lawmakers at the state capitol will fix that.
That's into the law finally, but
Legislation is making its way through both chambers to change that, all in hopes of allowing people like Burt to freshen up some hairdos on the fly.
this is enabling people to be able to go up the economic ladder, to be entrepreneurs, to be innovative.
But for Burt, it isn't about the money or himself, really.
The reward for me would be like the ripple effect. Like I'm just a rock in the water. Hopefully this causes other barbers to get out and do.
Although the odds might have been stacked against him, he knows he's on the right path now.
I don't make many excuses. As you can see, I'm here. I got 5 or 6 felonies, 4 trips to prison. I could have been quit, but I'm here.
So this was actually a really good example. He did everything right. He acted polite and professional when he was meeting with legislators. He stated a clear goal, what he wanted to accomplish, and the road that they needed to take to get there. And he said scheduled times to meet with his legislator. He didn't try to bombard them with the issues, but he knew his message. He practiced a lot. He stayed calm when he was talking with legislators. He made eye contact with them, which is one of the best ways to communicate respect. And he was ready to respond to alternative viewpoints. Everything that he did in his meetings, you should work to emulate in your meetings with elected officials as well. He actually was one of the inspirations for our governor here to reinstate voting rights for felons when they are contributing to the greater community. So I think probably one of the most compelling things about what he was able to accomplish was to tie it back to a message, right? He was able to cater to a greater consumership with his mobile barbershop. He was able to provide resources for people that weren't able-bodied, that couldn't go to a traditional barbershop. Those kind of things matter. Those kind of things resonate with legislators. So the more that you can make it a personal issue, the better it's going to be in establishing that rapport and making sure that they remember what the issue is to really understand it. Now, as we mentioned before, contacting your elected official, the second most effective way to do so, other than an in-person meeting, is by phone call. So there are some important do's and don'ts with phone calls as well. And I think that just like with the in-person meetings, it's important to know what to do and what not to do regarding phone calls as well. But phone calls are similar to the in-person meeting, wherein you are building rapport with your elected official, but you have even less time to do so. So let's take a look at some of the don'ts and see if you can pick out some of the things that are maybe not so efficient when this individual reaches out to their elected official.
Tonight, disturbing messages from Michigan Congressman Fred Upton after he and 12 other Republicans voted for President Biden's infrastructure bill late Friday night.
The motion is adopted.
This death threat left on his office voicemail.
I hope your family dies. Hope everybody, your staff dies. And peace. Mayor.
So pardon the language, but I mean, they had a clear ask, and there's certainly going to be a memorable interaction, but this elected official is going to remember this individual for all of the wrong reasons, right? I think by this time it goes without saying, but never be threatening or hostile or abrasive to these individuals. Most of the time when you call in to speak with your elected official, you're going to be speaking with an aide. And it's incredibly important to treat those individuals with respect as well. Once you say something, you can't get it back. So having no clear call to action, referring to no specific piece of legislation in your phone call is never a good way to establish your expertise or to build rapport. If you're not providing anything constructive or anything for them to act on, arguably this individual did, but you're not being helpful and you're not making your situation better. So it's always incredibly important to have a clear call to action, have a clear and concise message for your elected officials, and to just be kind and respectful every interaction that you have, right? So failing to provide your contact information is also part of the don'ts here that we saw in this video, although I'm sure that they were able to obtain his phone number, and I'm sure individuals will be reaching out to him shortly. So I think that it's important to follow that one up with a good example of a phone call, and we'll play this message here and see if you can pick out some of the great things that this individual does. Oh, bear with me 1 second.
Congressman Murray's office. How may I direct your call?
Yes, I'd like to speak to the person that's in charge of ag issues.
Thank you. 1 moment, please. I'll transfer you.
Hello, this is Jeff.
Hi, Jeff. My name's Michelle Eaton, and I'm a constituent of Congressman Murray. And I wanted to speak to you on HR 1549 if you have a moment.
Sure, Michelle, real quick, we get a lot of legislation through this office. Can you remind me again, really quick, what is 1549?
Yeah, that's regarding the preservation of antibiotics for medical treatment.
Okay, sure.
I just wanted to let the congressman know that
right now, the antibiotics used by pork producers are approved by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, and they really don't see the reason to have them approved again. All we're really concerned about is healthy animals, so we can have safe food. And so I just would like to ask if you can count on the representative to oppose this bill.
You know, Michelle, we don't have a position on that legislation right now, but I do appreciate you giving me a call and letting me know that these things are already approved. If you could, what is your zip code, quick, Michelle?
It's 50124.
And in case we have any questions down the road, would it be all right if we call you, Michelle?
Definitely.
And what was your phone number?
It's area code 515 256 1275.
Okay. Well, Michelle, thanks for your time. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye.
So there were some key things that this individual did really well on this phone call. Ideally, this is what you want. This is exactly what you want to have when it comes to a phone call. She introduced herself. She established herself as a constituent, why they should why they should be listening to what she has to say, right? She was polite. She referred to a specific piece of legislation and knew exactly what that piece of legislation was and why it was important. She had a precise reason for calling, she was asking the legislator for support or opposition on a ballot measure or a bill. She was also able to provide answers to their questions and had a specific call to action. One really great thing about phone calls versus an in-person meeting, you'll notice it right in front of her there. She had a notepad, right? And when you're making a phone call to an elected official, I think that that's a really good practice to have. Write down the 2 or 3 key points that you want to touch on. Make sure that to make sure that they remember exactly why your call is important and why they should listen to you. But as you saw, the phone call itself lasted only about a minute. And in that minute, she was able to establish exactly what she was calling for, have the specific ask, and refer to the specific piece of legislation that she was calling about. And she was ready to handle alternative viewpoints. The great thing about phone calls is that they can't see you fidget. They can't see any of the nonverbal cues that you might do that might deplete your confidence or competence in the issue. But if you are coming across professional and polite, then you'll have a greater effect with your phone call and a greater opportunity to move a particular piece of legislation in a favorable way. So we mentioned in the chart that the third most effective way, though it is slow, is writing to your elected officials. Now, I don't recommend writing if you're expecting an immediate response or wanting immediate feedback, but there are some do's and don'ts when it comes to writing as well. So as we did before, we'll take a look at something that you should definitely not do in a piece of writing. And look at some of the best practices of writing as well. So take a look at this post here. This one was sent from an individual's corporate email. Now, the date at the bottom of this email seems a little bit daunting here, but I'll let you read through this email and see if you can pick out some of the things that this individual did not do very well. I think it goes without saying at this point, do not threaten to kill a lawmaker. Citing mass execution of public officials across the land is never a good way to be memorable to an elected official. And while he might have had a clear call to action, it is not a good one, and is not going to boost him up as an expert. The fact that this individual felt compelled to send it from his corporate email address is really disheartening. Keep in mind, when you are interacting with individuals from your corporate email or from your personal email, you are representing the brand. You are the ambassador of your company when you use that email. When you are communicating for your industry on behalf of aquaculture, you are also an ambassador of the industry. So being respectful and maintaining your industry's and your company's reputation is incredibly important. Once you send something in writing, it's permanent. The difference between libel and slander is one is written and you can never get it back. So some helpful tips when it comes to writing dues, and this information is included in the resource guide that Charlie sent out to you all. Really good things to keep in mind when you are writing. Personal writing has a much bigger effect than forum emails. So anytime that you can put your personal story, your lived reality into a piece of writing, it's going to be much more effective in building rapport and establishing your expertise. But you always want to make sure that you're writing to persuade, not to scold. If you're going to write a letter to an elected official, take a look at some of the bills that they've sponsored or some of the laws that have gone into effect that they voted in favor of that are beneficial to the industry. They hardly ever hear thank you. So the more that you can give them thanks for some of the good things that they have done, the more apt they're going to be to listen to you. But double checking everything is incredibly important as well. Make sure that you know the name of the bill, the committee name, any relevant facts or data, and always double check your spelling and grammar. Word is a fairly good program. It will catch most of your spelling and grammatical errors, but I would say that Grammarly does a much better job and it helps you develop much more powerful writing. When you are including the facts and data, make sure that you are only including the ones that back up your claim, that substantiate your argument. You don't need to write them a 4-page letter. It should be 1 page at most, and be very clear, concise, and compelling at the same time. Okay. So as I mentioned, the length for this is 3 to 4 paragraphs. We're not writing 7-page papers, right? And if you get off track, if you feel like you're rambling at all, it's always good to go back to the human action model, right? You want to create the sense of unease. Why is this issue that you're writing about a problem? You want to create a vision for a better state. How can the lawmaker make things better? And then you want to provide a pathway to get there. What can they do specifically to make it better for you and for their constituents? There is a template for you as well and a writing sample in the resource guide as well. We talked a little bit about earlier, being able to find your lawmakers' contact information. This is a really good free resource. If you go to Open States, go over to the Find Your Legislators little form and enter your address. You can take a look at your state or federal legislators' contact information. And that's a great opportunity. You can see their phone number, their email address, anything that you need and their physical address. But that is a really good way to make sure that you are sending your information or calling the correct person regarding any piece of legislation that you're wanting to reach out about. So we talked before about the importance of telling your story. This is the most recent Census Bureau information, and I want you to pay close attention to Alaska. California, Louisiana, Alabama, Mississippi, all of those places saw pretty substantial population declines. The reason that that's important is because of this next map. All of those areas that saw pretty significant declines in population are all areas that have major aquaculture farms in them, right? What that translates into is there are less people that are living in those places that understand your industry. There are less people that are going to be sympathetic to any bills or laws that affect your industry negatively. These animal rights activist groups are moving into specific areas and getting coalitions built at the state level so that they can impose animal welfare laws that are impacting all of animal agriculture. These are just a few of the groups. If you're not telling your story, somebody else is. And in the case of animal agriculture, most of the time, these are the groups that will step in and fill that void. We're up against a lot of groups that seek to hinder our ability to produce our goods in our industry, right? And they're well funded too. The Humane Society of the US, for example, has over $170 million in their budget. I know that we could do a whole lot more for the pork industry if we had that much of a budget at our will. They also have over 10 million members and 69 affiliated organizations, both for-profit and nonprofit. They have been focusing a lot of their work on increasing legislative group coalitions to go after lawmakers, to do ballot initiatives, and to gain support for their causes. All of these groups, their main cause is to end animal agriculture as a whole. They don't care about the species. They don't care if it's a generational farm that you have devoted your livelihood to. They are seeking to end animal agriculture as a whole. So tell your story, speak up, make sure that your message is compelling enough to make people take action. As our final thoughts here, I want to just remind you that as a part of US agriculture, your participation in public policy is vital. There are not many people in ag, and so the ones that are there, the ones that are experts in their industry, need to speak up and tell their story to political officials so that we can keep beneficial policy in place. Grassroots participation doesn't have to be a complicated process, but you do have to have patience for long-term results. Nothing really happens quickly in government, as you know, so being able to show up again and again and tell your story is the most important part, however you are able to do so. But as a constituent, you will have an influence on your elected officials. They care about the vote. They want your vote, and they want to make sure that they can keep their job. So tell your message and tell your story. That's the most important part. Now you have three options. You can start taking an active role in policy and make things happen. You can assume that someone else will do it for you and watch things happen, or you can do nothing and wonder what happened. Now, Charlie sent out the evaluation form and the sign-up form. The way that we get as much done as we do in the pork industry is through building coalitions. I would definitely offer the opportunity to join our coalition and become a leader. We send out information and ask you to participate and speak up on a given issue. Typically, that's just a phone call or an email. But we would love to do the same for you. So if you are able, definitely fill out that form and let me know how I did. But we would look forward to having you be a part of our coalition as well. But if you have any questions or concerns about this program or anything dealing with advocacy or grassroots, definitely feel free to contact myself or anybody on my team. We deal with a wide range of issues and are happy to help with anything that might come along for your industry as well. Thank you so much.